Welcome to a brand new week. Ibidation Sports Talk up and rolling on a Monday, along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. How was your weekend, Vince?
Boring. And I'm not saying that necessarily in a bad way. Like I'm okay with boring every now and again. Let's see, it was wrestling sectionals on Saturday.
Right.
And not a darn thing on Sunday. So it was pretty great, actually. So got some.
What I see, Penn had 7 or 8 sectional champions, something like that.
All 14 advanced to the next round. But, I will say this. It is not difficult to advance because you only have to be top 4, and some of the weight classes only had like 6, or 5,
That's the thing about Indiana. I was thinking about this after we were having the wrestling conversation. We're going to bore everybody to tears right off the bat talking wrestling,
okay.
But like Indiana, all of their sports, like you have to go sectional, then you go regional, then you go semi-state, and then you go state. So you've got all these different rounds that you have to get through.
Yes, mostly. Some sports are different, but yeah.
Right. And now, things change from year to year and, decade to decade, obviously. But, like we all 4 years I was in high school, you went to a regional. And if you were top 4 at the regional, you went to state. Now,
that's it. Wow.
It varied. Sometimes the regional was a 16-team regional. And then, you got to state. And then it started out like that. And then at the end, they made them 8 teams at regionals, and then they expanded, like who was at, then it became a 16-person bracket at state, that kind of thing. But we also had, a lot more. We had like 3-2, 1A, 3A, 2A, and 1A were together, all the small schools basically, and then it was 4A, 5A, 6A each had their own tournaments as well.
So interesting.
Again,
that's a lot,
little different, but they didn't make you jump through all the like a million hoops like you do.
There's no classes. There's no classes for wrestling though.
Exactly.
So that's the problem. Everybody's in the same tournament, so it takes longer to
like the old basketball tournament, basically.
That's when it was good. Let's be honest.
Yes. Women's basketball beat Louisville yesterday, and we'll touch on this again in a little bit. But we are going to do tomorrow a full-blown Notre Dame women's basketball mailbag.
It's a good thing I've been doing my homework by watching all the games, so I'm ready.
There you go.
I'm ready.
All right.
I did the whole. I synced you up to the video last night.
Okay.
So I had me some Sean Stiers, and then I put my TV on mute. And, I worked for a little bit to get it all synced up. And it was funny because Dylan walked into the room. Obviously I had my phone with you on it and I'm watching the TV and he's like, "Oh, you're listening to Sean." And I said, "Yeah, because he knows more than these idiots on TV." It was great.
Yeah, the last time I saw Rebecca Lobo, Hannah Hidalgo was busy putting daggers in UConn. Back in December, she was there for ESPN. It was the A team for ESPN.
It was. I will say that. I will say that if I was going to listen to the TV, it probably wouldn't have been terrible because they are pretty. When you got the A team, they're usually pretty decent. And it was like a pink game, so it was a whole deal. But I come on now, still rather listen to Sean Stiers.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Right on my Odyssey app, so it worked out well.
Awesome. So a ton of good questions. I put a thread on the Champions Lounge
for mailbag
questions, and there's a ton of good questions.
Really,
kind of let more trickle in. So we're going to do full blown Notre Dame women's basketball mailbag on tomorow's show.
Sweet.
I think it's going to be fun. A lot of good stuff that we can get into there.
They're a fun team to watch, Sean. I'm telling you,
they are. It was a little tough at times yesterday. Like they get up. I don't know if you watched the full game. It's like get up to a big lead, see the lead shrink, and then you're trading leads back and forth. A few too many turnovers, I think, for everybody's life.
I had 23, I think, was the answer.
They did. 23 is the answer, and only 11 assists. So, those two numbers right there kind of tell the story of a good chunk of the game. But things got better, obviously, as the game wore on.
Yes, there were some missed opportunities from an assist standpoint. I think there were some good passes that did not get completed baskets on the other end.
Yeah.
And then there were, and again, you gotta give the opposition a little bit of a tip of the cap. They were doing a good job getting their hands in the passing lanes too, but there were some lazy passes going on as well. So it's I agree. Combination of all of those things, I think, prevented Notre Dame from pulling away until they finally did.
So I don't know. I won't make excuses. They did end up winning, but those noon road games, man, like I think, I realize they're young and all that stuff, but that's got to be, like waking up and, all that.
I get that.
Getting sharp and
makes for an early morning.
So, yeah. But again, we'll talk more Notre Dame women's basketball in a little bit in the show after we talk some football. And again, full-blown mailbag tomorrow. So if you're a Champions Lounge member, premium, whatever, go to the Champions Lounge and drop a question in. I don't know exactly. I know there's different tiers to it and all that stuff. But whatever. Yeah. Get your questions in on the Champions Lounge. We'll talk about it. I've got some video I'm going to play for you from a game last week of Hannah Hidalgo. I hope your interest is piqued in this.
I am as I was reading through the deal today, and I saw that, and I was like, I hate these tests because you're gonna ask me what I noticed, and I'm like, oh God, what did I miss? Because I've been
it's gonna be more simple. It's gonna be pretty simple. It's gonna be pretty simple. I think that when I'm because I left the question open ended for you.
Yes, you did.
And I'm just going to ask you what you see, and you're going to tell me what you see, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So,
yeah, I'm nervous, but that's okay.
Because I think it's pretty obvious to everybody, but not as obvious to some people. So, all right. So that's a little bit later. We'll do that. More Notre Dame women's basketball, and then on tomorrow's show, full mailbag show, Notre Dame women's basketball tomorrow. So looking forward to that.
Beautiful.
In the meantime, though. This was a question submitted on the Athletic, Stuart Mandel's mailbag. It was submitted for the mailbag on the Athletic. So the person asks, here's the question. Someone asked this. Am I crazy here, or is the reaction to Marcus Freeman possibly a giant overreaction to a good path, favored in the first 3 games, and some fortunate breaks in key moments? If the 2018 or 2020 Brian Kelly teams had the same path in the playoff instead of facing Death Star Clemson and Alabama, where they were massive underdogs, don't you think they'd also have gotten to the same exact place? What has Freeman done that is any different than Brian Kelly other than look better on the sidelines and generally be more likable? So this was an actual person, not AI. Person took the time to write this question.
I'm fascinated to know what Stuart Mandel's answer was to this whole thing, because he's obviously a national guy. He's not a guy.
I don't know if he actually answered this question because, like, on the Athletic, what they do when they're going to do a mailbag, they post a thing, and like you can actually see as the people submit their questions, and then from this full list of questions, they go back and answer it. So I haven't had time. I haven't seen the actual mailbag post that. I don't know if he's actually responded yet, but I'll readdress that a little bit later.
I actually got a little angry just reading that question.
I'm sure you did. I knew this was going to fire you up, so I figured why not.
I'm like, and I was trying to like organize my thoughts, and we're going to get into it, but like I was just like, where do I begin? Like where do I start to make an actual reasoned response to this? Because I feel like anybody that watches college football would be like, yeah, duh, unless you wear purple and gold.
Right.
It's the only thing I can think of that anybody would push back on this, but that's fine. I'm ready.
Go ahead. What do you think?
I thought you were going to break it down.
That's right. I'm sorry. I started scrolling. Okay. So I'm actually looking here, and their call for questions went up last week, and
he has
not posted the actual responses to those questions yet.
Because I would love to know.
Next day or two. I know.
I would love to know what his response is.
I was just double checking to make sure because I hadn't seen, there's no guarantee he'll respond because they get a ton of questions and they don't respond to everything. But obviously this one stood out because obvious reasons. So let's start with the first part. And I actually broke this down into 3 parts. The reaction to Marcus Freeman. Is it possibly a giant overreaction to a good path and some fortunate breaks in key moments? Like, and again, this doesn't specifically mention like what breaks in key moments we're talking about, like I can only imagine like what breaks did they get that Notre Dame didn't create their own?
That's the key right there. Yeah. Okay. Is it a break that, Georgia fumbled going into the end zone, when they were about ready to score? That's not a break because Notre Dame forced that fumble. It was a helmet on the football. That's not a break. That's a break that you created. So that doesn't count. Same game. Is it a break that RJ Oben got a strip sack, and set Notre Dame up for a short field? No, that's not a break because they forced that break. It's not like, for example, and a very clear-cut example, like the Navy game where Navy was just like coughing up the football without being touched, right? That didn't happen in the playoff. Not one time did that happen in the playoff, whether you're talking about IU, whether you're talking about Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State. Like that stuff never happened. Anything that happened good for Notre Dame, they created themselves. It wasn't just where Penn State just like, oh no, here, take the ball.
Like Drew Aller, it wasn't just a bad pass. It was a bad pass that was forced by the pressure that Jalen Sneed provided.
Correct.
He had to get rid of it.
Correct.
That's what it came down to.
That's called a forced turnover.
Right. Like you can question the decision of James Franklin to try to push it at that point, and instead of maybe, just trying to play for overtime, but that's the decision that James Franklin made, and Notre Dame's players took. I mean, again, like look at the interception that Christian Gray made. Like it's not like that was, he was just standing there waiting for the ball to come to him. That was a spectacular
amazing play,
diving interception to make that play.
Correct. And then, people are giving Kirby Smart a hard time about, trying to push the ball down the field at the end of the first half, with an inexperienced quarterback that we spent 10 days learning about the fact that Georgia's a better football team with this guy at quarterback.
Supposedly because of him at quarterback. Yeah,
correct. Exactly. But
it's what everybody told us.
Now it's Kirby's fault for using said quarterback to try to push the ball down the field. Like, you can't have it both ways. You know what I mean? Like Notre Dame created those breaks. They weren't handed anything. And anybody that says that they wasn't watching the same games that we were watching. I'm sorry.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Right. So the second part, if the 2018 or 2020 Brian Kelly teams had the same path in the playoff instead of facing Death Star Clemson and Alabama, where they were massive underdogs, don't you think they'd also have gotten to the exact same place? So what's your response to that?
So no, first of all, that's not the case because Death Star Alabama in 2012 was, there weren't a whole lot of teams that were going to beat that team in that moment. You know what I mean? And Notre Dame or otherwise.
Well, they said 2018 and 2020
were
the two
I'm sorry.
that they
so we're not even going to talk about when they were actually in the national championship game. Okay, got it.
Right.
So 2018, the problem with 2018 for Notre Dame was they had no depth. They had some pretty good frontline guys, but they had no depth. And
exactly.
that was perfectly, spotlighted when, of course, the name
Julian Love goes out.
Julian Love went down. Yes, when Julian Love went down, they had no answer, and Clemson knew it, and so they attacked, his replacement, and that's when
they literally have 3 or 4 Julian Loves now. And
correct.
You can argue that the guys that they've got playing corner are even. Like Benjamin Morrison and Leonard Moore specifically, and even Christian Gray at times, or maybe even a step above what Julian. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Julian Love
great
because he's obviously he's been playing in the NFL since then. Even though he had to change positions, he is playing safety. But yeah, Julian Love was great. But now they've got 3 of those guys out there. And you talk about the difference,
right? it's a depth. Like I will just stick with depth, right? The frontline guys, there's some comparisons that you can make, right? I still think that Notre Dame's offense this year was better than Notre Dame's offense in 2018, but the depth on defense was so different because as soon as one frontline guy went out, they had no answers. And Notre Dame had to deal with second and third team guys coming in all year long and still playing at an elite level. I mean, the depth is just, it's not even a comparable situation. And so Notre Dame was playing even with the limitations that they had offensively, because I don't think that they actually win that game, but it was neck and neck until that injury, right? Until that happened. And then Clemson took control of the game and it was over, right? Because the offense couldn't help the defense at that point. I mean, there was just no way that was going to happen. So I wouldn't call it Death Star Clemson. That's ridiculous, first of all, but whatever. Notre Dame was outclassed in that game because they didn't have the depth that Clemson had. And Clemson had a generational quarterback who took advantage of the fact that Notre Dame was weak in that spot. That's what you do, right? It's about matchups. So that by itself is ridiculous. I don't buy that one. And then as far as 2020 is concerned, I think that was the next one, right? 18 and 20.
Yeah.
2020 was just an odd year in the first place. And, you know, I give Brian Kelly some credit for navigating the team through all the COVID protocols and, you know, all of that stuff, but they still weren't a deep team. They still weren't built to last in a playoff or anything like that. And they, you know, they kind of, yes, they went undefeated, but when Clemson was full strength, you know, they got their doors blown off. I mean, they couldn't compete with that Clemson team when Trevor Lawrence was at quarterback. I mean, they were neck and neck when it was DJ Uiagalelei, right? And went to overtime and won the game, and it was big and it was great. But at the end of the day, when they were full strength and there was the three defensive guys that were out in that game too, they came back. Trevor Lawrence came back, and it was like, I mean, the ACC championship was a precursor for what the rest of the season was going to be.
Right. And I mean, you know, look, obviously this person is saying, well, yeah, you know, like you still would have lost, you know, like, so if Notre Dame obviously would have been pitted against Ohio State, if this were still a 4-team playoff, you know, things would have looked, I guess, like Ohio State would have been the Death Star in this year's playoff, right? But It's important to remember that neither Ohio State nor Notre Dame were going to make it into a 4-team field if the field was still 4. So, I mean, you had not just Notre Dame playing in a national championship game, but also an Ohio State team winning the national championship because the format is different now. So it's obviously a complete apples to oranges argument.
Right.
But, you know, and obviously I don't disagree with what you're talking about, depth and everything else, and a difference in the level of skill players and those things that they had. But to get there, you've got to beat good teams, right? And Brian Kelly was something like 4-10 against top 10 teams in his time at Notre Dame. Man. I mean, that's the bottom line. Yes. Marcus Freeman beat 3 consecutive top 10 teams to get to the national championship game.
Right.
That's something that Brian Kelly, you know, like remember Brian Kelly was here for 12 years to beat those 4 top 10 teams. Marcus Freeman did it in 3 consecutive weeks.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly obviously never won a major postseason bowl game. Marcus Freeman won 2 in consecutive weeks. The Orange
2
Bowl
and then arguably 3. You and I had this conversation, right? Arguably
if you
3.
want to include the fact that it was a top 10 team, even though it's a home playoff game.
Yeah. 2 for sure.
I do find it curious that you're trying to include that now.
Well,
since,
I just said arguably.
So heavily.
I said arguably because that was your argument and you're making another one. And so I'm helping you. I'm helping you. But yeah, I still think.
But I mean, that's Marcus Freeman is winning these games. Brian Kelly.
Yes.
That big game, those big game failures have followed Brian Kelly to LSU, because going back to find his record and all that kind of like LSU people now 3 years in are noting what his record is against top 10 and top 25 teams. Mm-hmm. And here's a hint. It still ain't that good. Yeah,
and exactly.
On the other side, Marcus Freeman is winning these games, but a lot of it goes to, exactly what you're talking about, the depth and all these different things that, that Marcus Freeman has brought to this team. Now there were a couple teams that Brian Kelly had that still succeeded at, like the 2015 team. They lost a lot of guys, that year to injury as well. And they ended up with a pretty good year. But that was, when they lose to Clemson in the rain. And they obviously didn't end up, in the playoff, or they were in playoff contention before they folded in November. And that's another thing is, Brian Kelly did get that corrected later in his Notre Dame career, some of those November swoons that he had. But at the same time, that hasn't happened to Marcus Freeman either. Like, this team has obviously shown that it can get stronger as the season goes on.
Yeah, no, look, we can give Brian Kelly his flowers for bringing Notre Dame, bringing them up to where they were when he left. But at the end of the day, he wasn't winning those big games. He just wasn't. And it comes down to, and I don't think he beats Georgia. And I think he beats IU if he's in charge of this team. But the other thing is, let me finish that thought before I go back. I think he beats IU. I don't think he beats Georgia. I don't think he beats Penn State, right? I agree. But here's the other thing. He doesn't have this roster to work with if he's still the head coach at Notre Dame either. And that's something that, you can take Brian Kelly and you can put him in charge of this team, but Marcus Freeman put this team together. And I don't think Brian Kelly puts this team together. You know what I mean? I just don't see it. I don't see him being the architect of this team with all this depth.
No, so it would look a lot differently than what it looks like.
And right, they probably don't get in the playoff in the first place because they probably don't have the depth that they ended up having. And with the injuries that they had and having to lean on all that depth, there's a couple more games that they lose in the regular season, USC being one of them, because it's at the end of the year. The chips were all in at that point. It's like win and you're in. Those are games that Brian Kelly didn't win. And so I think they lose some of those games down the stretch because they wouldn't have had the depth that Marcus Freeman's team had, because Marcus Freeman is the architect of that roster.
Completely agree with that. And then, again, I think this ties into the last part of what this person wrote. What has Freeman done that's any different than Brian Kelly, other than look better on the sidelines and generally more likable? And I was going to ask you, like, the 2 or 3 tangible ways that Freeman's impacted Notre Dame on the field. And you talked about the depth, and that's a big thing. And, the transfer portal, is such a huge part of this. The key pieces that Marcus Freeman has added. And I think that, again, especially when you look at how LSU has handled the portal, because the rise of the portal has really coincided with this Marcus Freeman taking over and Kelly going to LSU. The portal has not favored Brian Kelly down there in the way it's favored Marcus Freeman here. And so not only would the recruiting look a lot different than, compared to what Marcus Freeman has done, but the transfer portal, not only would he most likely not have gotten some of these, very specific guys. Like, I don't think Jordan Clark comes here, for example, if it's Brian Kelly and not Marcus Freeman, because obviously Ryan Clark and Freeman, had a relationship. Just how much that played into it, I don't know. But I'll, just as a very specific example, I don't think that Jordan Clark comes here. Jordan Clark was, to some extent unsung, but a big factor in the secondary, especially when you consider that you didn't have Benjamin Morrison for more than 2/3 of the season as it ended up. And I know that a lot of people want to talk about, and I think that there would probably, in the transfer portal era, there would probably be more impactful departures via the portal, I think, if Brian Kelly were here and not Marcus Freeman.
Completely agree. The only,
because of the personality, just the difference in personality and the way things are run.
Yeah, and just the way that his players played for Marcus Freeman is completely different. Than
the culture is different, Kelly. And that's
completely
a big part
different.
of it. The culture is completely different. The culture that Marcus Freeman has brought completely different than the one when he was defensive coordinator here.
The only transfer portal recruit that I will give Brian Kelly in this, iteration of him is Jaden Daniels, because he came in Kelly's first year. So I'll give that one to him. But he doesn't, it's supposed to be easier down in LSU to get,
But that also wasn't that people still revisionists try to make it out like Brian Kelly got some finished product with Jaden Daniels.
He wasn't at all finished product.
Like they were still taking a chance on him to an extent, when you look at his numbers from Arizona State and, what Mike Denbrock did with him. Yeah.
Was,
but yeah,
very impressive. Yeah.
You've got to give him that. He went there, he won the Heisman, played great in the NFL in his rookie season. So,
and his, the first year he was there, he wasn't all that great. And then obviously the second year he was there, he was
took off
a heck of a lot better. Yeah. There's no two ways about it. I mean, he went from a 65% passer in his last year at Arizona State to a 72% passer, at LSU his second year. He upped his yards by 1,500 yards passing. And then what was it? Almost 2,000 yards total, from what he was doing at Arizona State. So, I mean, but again, so I will give him that. But that's it. That's one guy. And let's be honest, what you did with that one guy was go 9-3. So
that's very true. He had a great individual season. You didn't have you had a good regular season is what
right.
You had.
Yes.
Not great by any means.
You pass him off to the Washington Commanders, which are an arguably, troubled franchise. I'll just say that. And he goes 12-5 in his first year and takes him to the playoffs. You know what I mean? So I will give him credit, but only so much. He still can't win big games, even with a generational quarterback like Jaden Daniels was. So I'll give you a little.
Freeman takes chances on special teams, and I think this is a different mentality as well. Not just the special teams, but the
chances, period.
Yeah, like taking chances, going for it on fourth down, and doing some of those different things. That was Brian Kelly is obviously much more conservative by nature than what we've seen from Marcus Freeman in that department. So I don't know. I haven't watched enough LSU to know how much, BK is going forward on fourth down there at LSU, but I doubt it's, especially like either the success or the, just the number of attempts that Freeman has had here at Notre Dame.
And that's the thing. Look, that's even been part of the maturation process of who Marcus Freeman is as a head coach too, because he wasn't taking those chances early on in his career, and now he is. And Brian Kelly, look, the one of the biggest sticking points of in-game Brian Kelly and also quarterback development Brian Kelly was don't take a chance. Don't turn the football over. Protect the football at all times. And that leads to not taking chances on fourth down. That leads, all of those things. And it also led to, Ian Book not pushing the ball down the field because it was just ingrained in his head over and over and over. And this isn't even a knock on Ian Book. This is a knock on the coaching. Don't turn the ball over. Don't take any chances. Check it down. All of these different things. You're not going to win big games doing that. And they didn't. And that is straight from his philosophy of offense. Don't take a chance. Don't turn the football over. And I feel like it's kind of been that way down at LSU as well.
Absolutely. Again, he's just much more conservative by nature. And I think that, the difference in mindset, that Marcus Freeman has given these guys compared to the mindset that Freeman has with the fakes on, special teams and it's not even always just the fakes on special teams, but the blocks and the fact that I think just the special teams attitude is completely different. And I know we've talked about this a lot before, but Brian Kelly just didn't want special teams to be a liability. It didn't have to be an asset. He just wanted it to be a break even. Marcus Freeman has, much more of the, we're fully including special teams as, one of three aspects of the game, not just offense, defense, but special teams is involved in this as well, kind of like going back like the old, Virginia Tech, and, like that's kind of the, the mentality that they had in the 90s and early 2000s, was that special teams were a part of it. And the fact that Marcus Freeman contributes to special teams, as a coach, like he's out there coaching special teams guys. I think that like you're showing that it's a priority. It's not just so that's also part of the game. And we got to have some bodies out there on the field. They take it seriously.
Yeah.
But again, the other part of it is the mindset that he's giving with the confidence that you instill to both sides of the ball, that you're willing to go for it on fourth down. And it's just, it's fourth and 1, 4th and 2. So now we're just going to lay up and punt here. Like you're instilling a different kind of mindset in your roster when you are willing to go for it as much as he does.
No doubt about it. And they play like they know their coach has confidence in them. And at times, and under Brian Kelly's tenure, that was not always the case. And
right.
It shows. Look, it's still college. You know what I mean? Yes, college football is more of a business now than it has ever been, right? With kids making extra money and all of these different things. It's more of a business than it'll ever be. But you're still talking about 18 to 20-ish year old kids. And I know some of these guys are a lot older, but 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part, you're still talking about kids who still need to be motivated. They still need to feed off of that motivation from their head coach. It's not the NFL, right? It's just not. And these kids aren't NFL players. They're still college kids. And so that's still part of it. Like, I don't know that Lou Holtz would have ever been a good NFL head coach, but he was a great college coach because he was able to motivate players. You know what I mean? And Brian Kelly just never had that. He has always been just kind of the CEO, we're on a business trip. We're just going to always keep it right here. We're not going to get too high. We're not going to get too low. We're going to be right here. And that will win you 9 or 10 games every year, but that is not going to win you anything big, because you have to be able to get your team up here. You have to be able to get them up here to win some big games. And Brian Kelly's just not able to do that. Marcus Freeman knows how to get his guys up here. So, and honestly, Marcus Freeman has always been able to get the guys up here. It's been the crappy games getting them, up to where they need to be. And I think he's kind of figured that out now, but that's where he struggled, right? But he was always able to get his teams up for a big game. And he's just good at it. I mean, he just is.
Mike says still no return game on punts, though. And I mean, punts are tough. Like it's almost a fluke when you get a big punt return, just with the way, the coverage and all that kind of stuff. It is hard to consistently, because like 10 yards is a good punt. 10 yards is considered a good punt return.
And here's the thing, punters, and I know this is he's going to talk about kicking again. Punters are so much better now than they were even 15 years ago, because they can kick the ball so high and so far that it allows the coverage teams to get down there, and there's just not as much room to return those punts. That's just a reality of it. I mean, kickers and punters are kicking the ball so much further now than they ever were in the past, because these guys are specializing so much more than they ever were in the past. And punters are the same way. And I think punt teams are schemed up now. People are spending more time on scheme than they ever did in the past too. It used to just be, hey guy, we're going to put 11 out there, just kick it down there and we'll just make it happen. You know what I mean? Like, now punters are holding the ball longer. They're, doing the rugby style. They're able to accurately put the ball where they want to put the ball, right? They can put it between the numbers and the sideline and pin you in the corner. They can, make you, if you're standing right, if you're on the hash, they can kick it to the other side of the field in between the numbers and the sideline. I mean, there's a lot of things that punters are doing now that they weren't doing in the past that just are negating the return game. Just are.
Yeah. And then the other area that Freeman, like we talk about this depth, why do you have depth? Because you're recruiting well. And I know that there are still people who look at some of these classes and go, well, you're not getting a number 1 rated recruiting class. Look, if Deuce Knight had stayed in the class would have been right up there toward the top of the heap. Like, a highly rated quarterback means that much, can swing a recruiting class that much, for one thing. But like if you look at the blue chip ratio, and we've talked about this before, the blue chip ratio is the percentage of 4 and 5 stars that you have in a given recruiting class. Over Brian Kelly's last 5 years, his blue chip ratio was 50%. Marcus Freeman, first 4 classes, have a ratio of 70%. So like 20% difference right there. Difference. If Freeman is signed 64 4 or 5 stars in his first 4 classes, which is 6 more than Brian Kelly had in his last 5 classes. So, I mean, that's why you have better depth across the board, because you've got more of those kind of guys coming in, but you also still have room, to develop some of these other guys. And that's the thing as well, because like you can't take the developmental aspect away from Brian Kelly. It's just that because he wasn't hitting at a higher rate with these 4-star guys, like you had to take the 3-star guy up to, potential like 4-star level, where if you're starting at 4, then you've only got to take those guys up a little bit more. So, like Freeman and Brian Kelly, Freeman's been in developmental programs, both with Luke Fickell and with Brian Kelly before he became a head coach. And, again, like you do have to give it to, like, that's why Kelly was able to have the sustained success that he had at the end of his career here, his Notre Dame career, was because of the developmental aspect of his program. So you've got to give him that. But but Marcus Freeman has both the developmental as well as better recruiting chops. That's just what it is.
Completely agree. And the recruiting just makes such a difference, and that's where that depth is. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. It's so obvious that you can lose all of these offensive linemen to the transfer portal and still be okay. Because there's so much talent there. You know what I mean? And that's just one, finite example, obviously. But it's like that at every position. There's so much talent across the board that you can take some hits like this and then probably go to the transfer portal yourself and fill in some of those holes.
Well, and again, like Sam Pendleton, 3-star guy who worked his way into a spot where he played a little bit, gave him some good minutes, but now he's like he realizes obviously where his place was going to be in the pecking order had he returned, and he's going to be in a lot better position, transferring, going someplace else, playing someplace else. So how important, when you look at how Marcus Freeman is perceived, this program is perceived, and all these things that we're talking about, like if you're going to compare, again, and like this question came from whoever from the outside looking in at Notre Dame.
I would love to know who Cletus was that put this in.
I know, right? I know, right? How important do you think it was, though, for Notre Dame to battle back in the championship game after being down 31-7? Like when you look at how people are viewing this program right now.
Oh, it was massive. It was absolutely massive because, look, people that hate Notre Dame are still going to hate Notre Dame regardless of the outcome as far as them losing, right? But, the way that game started was fantastic, but the drive down there and scoring a touchdown and just manhandling Ohio State from the jump, it was like, okay, this is going to be fun. And then it took a bad turn, right? And I was in a bad mood. But then Notre Dame battled back, and I think
I can vouch for the bad mood.
Oh man, I was just
I don't know how many times I heard this.
Trying not to be loud,
pounding the table. Frustration.
So annoyed. I was frustrated, but Notre Dame proved that they belong there, in my opinion. They proved that they belonged in that game with the way that they played, down the stretch. And the unfortunate part was they dug themselves too big of a hole, to come back. And there were some things down the stretch that they didn't do well. And okay, fine. But they proved that they belonged. And that's why I left the game not as upset as I thought I would be, because they proved that they belonged. And because I still believe that they overachieved this season, there's things to look forward to in the future. This wasn't like a well, crap, they're just going to lose everybody this year. And, who knows what it's going to be like next year. You know what I mean? Like they get a ton of talent back, for 25 and beyond. And so it was like, okay, they belonged in 24. Now what's 25 going to look like? That was my mindset. And I think anybody that is just a neutral observer, if you take out the hatred of Notre Dame, if you're just watching this as a neutral observer, Notre Dame belonged in that game. They belonged there. And I think that made a difference.
And that's why the fact that they did battle back, that's why you didn't hear more of the, well, same old Notre Dame.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Marcus Freeman or Brian Kelly. It's just the same old. They don't belong in these games and all this different stuff. That's why you didn't hear more of that on the national level. I think that they gained a ton of respect for being able to battle their way back in that game. And, look, I know there are some people who say, well, Alabama or Ohio State, took their foot off the pedal and that kind of thing and let Notre Dame back into it. I honestly think that what we saw was Ryan Day's conservative nature, going back to the Michigan game. I think that's what we saw. It wasn't just that they took the foot off he was like, okay, protect it. He just went into, we're up 31-7, protect the lead, protect,
yes.
His conservative
very Brian Kelly
is that's exactly it. That was part of it. So so can you say, well, because of that, Notre Dame got back into it? I guess you can kind of, make the argument, look, 3rd and 11, they obviously didn't have any problem, taking their shot and it paid off for them.
Oh, ultimately. For sure.
But, but the bottom line is, look, Notre Dame won a lot of respect by being able to battle their way back into that game and making it a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter after it looked like there was no chance that was going to happen. Like I said, man, if they don't complete that pass on 3rd and 11, I thought we were going to overtime. I thought we were going to have an overtime national championship game.
I really did. Yeah. I was starting to believe again. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, you're telling me there's a chance. And then they complete that pass. And I was like,
that ball was in the air. And I was like, this is not going to be, because I look at the ball in the air and
it was coming right towards us.
There's just, right at us. Like it's like, there's just too much space between Gray and
I was like, it was, right now. I felt like it happened like literally right in front of me. Like I saw the ball go in the air. I looked down to see the separation. I was like, crap. I thought it was going to be a touchdown. Frankly, I thought it was a touchdown. And as the ball is in the air, I'm thinking to myself, that is a ballsy call. Like, you know what? That's where you tip your cap. Like, okay, great, good job.
Yep. Yeah, DK did get conservative. He didn't want to turn it over like Indiana, Georgia, and
he almost did.
Exactly.
He almost did. That's the thing.
Drake Bowen caused that turnover, and it obviously led to points. And I think that didn't it lead to the field goal? Is what that ended up leading to? Yeah,
I think so. Yep. Try to put it out of my mind. I had 11 hours and a Buc-ee's trip to forget about it.
You know what? Speaking of Buc-ee's,
no.
Where was I? Where the heck was I? It was in the hotel. I was trying to remember where I was. Hotel lobby yesterday morning, getting some free coffee, and 2 women wearing Buc-ee's sweatshirts.
See? Telling you.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Now you know. Now you know what it is. And you can
I know.
Because a month ago, you may not have realized what that was.
I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You're right.
So it's Buc-ee's, man. It's a craze. It's a craze.
All right, we'll switch gears a little bit. Notre Dame women's basketball, nice win over Louisville yesterday. Vince was kind of alluding to it earlier. There were times where, obviously I think it was 8 lead changes and 5 ties in the first half after they got up by 14 in the first quarter. And, some of the 23 turnovers played unfortunate role in Louisville climbing back in that game, but Notre Dame was able to figure it out by the time it was all said and done.
Yeah, it was, at first I was like, oh, this game's going to be kind of boring because Notre Dame's, they're up 14. They're not looking super crisp, But Louisville just looked not like a Louisville team that I've seen in the recent past, right? So I was like, okay, well, you know what? You're defeating your rival. You're up by double digits. Just maintain the lead, and you're going to be fine, even if it's not your most crisp day. And then they just started turning the ball over some more, and they allowed Louisville to come back in this game. And I think it was like a 9-0 run or an 11-3 run. So, I forget exactly what the numbers were, but Louisville went on this run where Notre Dame just could not buy a bucket. They could not score. And Louisville started getting hot from behind the arc. And once they started getting hot behind the arc and then Notre Dame couldn't score, that lead just shrunk very, very quickly. And I think it was a 1-point game at halftime. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Notre Dame was up by 1 at halftime. It was Robertson. She ended up getting ACC freshman of the week or rookie of the week or whatever it is this week.
She's a freshman. Wow, I didn't realize
3 3-pointers, and she had 14 points at halftime because she hit 4 3-pointers in the first half. She had 3 points the entire second half. So things swung
right.
Put the clamps down on her. So that was nice. And look, because you go down there to Louisville and they always, it's like you hear them talk and they've got that sweet little Southern draws and twangs and all that stuff. But they're not sweet when they're yelling expletives at Notre Dame women's basketball players. I can tell you that.
You could hear some of it on the radio broadcast. P.S.
Could you?
Oh yeah. They were not. There was one woman.
I tend to drown it out with my own voice, in my oaks. But you could hear some of them behind me.
But yeah, you could hear some not like the specifics. So you're okay from the whatever people that are mad about that kind of stuff. But you could tell there was some boos and there was a lot of audible action towards Notre Dame in a negative way. I will say that. So
Joseph wants to know which team is the toughest test for Notre Dame in the ACC. And again, I'll remind you, we're going to do a full mailbag on tomorrow's show, but I'll answer. I don't know if it was Joseph or somebody else. Right after we ended the show on Friday, somebody put a question like this in. And, literally, we had clicked the button to stop the show. And then I think that question popped up in the chat. Duke and NC State are the two best remaining teams on the schedule. Florida State has Tanaya Latson. She and Hannah Hidalgo right now, after Hannah scored 34 yesterday against Louisville, they're neck and neck right now for the national, not just the ACC, but the national scoring lead. Like Latson is like decimal points ahead of Hidalgo right now. So like she's the best player on that Florida State team overall, like the overall level of talent that Florida State has not, quite up to her, but she's a junior and a really good player. Obviously, she's leading the nation. She's been leading the nation in scoring for most of the season, and Hidalgo's been right behind her. So I would go NC State because like in comparison to Duke, for example, they're a little bit more athletic. Obviously, they were a Final Four team last year, and a team that brought back a pretty good amount of talent from that Final Four team. They lost a couple of key pieces, but. So I would say NC State, Duke, because of the defense they play. Like the biggest thing against Duke is who's going to dictate the tempo of the game. If it's Notre Dame, then Notre Dame will win. But Duke wants to slow you down and grind you. They want to make you play like a 55-50 kind of game. That kind of thing.
That'll be good. It'll be good to have that game at home though too.
Yeah, exactly.
Duke is 6-4 on the road, but they're undefeated at home. So Notre Dame's home crowd, which has been fantastic, by the way, I think would be good for that. NC State's on the road. That's going to be tough. NC State's 12-0 at home. Yep.
And Notre Dame is basically one game ahead of those teams in the ACC standings right now. So 10-0 for the first time since 2016.
Hey, they have not lost in the United States.
Very true. Good point. Never use a passport again, is what you're saying. Just stay
as long as the Final Four is not on an island someplace, I feel good about this.
You gotta feel pretty good about it.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's in Tampa Bay, which is close. But
Still in the States.
Still in the States.
So
you're good.
All right. So I'm going to play a video for you.
Okay.
And this
I'm
is
so nervous about this.
This is 2 clips from Hannah Hidalgo last Thursday against Virginia Tech. So I'm going to play this for you. And I just want you to tell me what you see in these clips.
So I'm paying attention to Hannah. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it'll be pretty apparent here.
Okay.
So I'm putting them up on the screen for anyone listening on the podcast later this week.
Little strip steal.
So you see this play here. Okay. Hannah ends up with the basketball after a Virginia Tech player had it. Now we're out near midcourt. And player down on the floor. All right.
Oh gosh, that's all I get.
So what'd you see Hannah do there?
I saw her with fast hands and stripping the ball away from the opposing player and going down and scoring. Little steal and a layup.
I heard on both occasions you used the word steal, right?
I did, yes, because it was clearly a steal.
Right. So I'll put this up on the screen again. I mean, you can obviously see where this game was played. It was played at Virginia Tech. And so, of course, the home team is always in charge of doing the stats for these games, right?
Come on now.
So
they didn't call those steals?
On both occasions, yes, Virginia Tech did not credit Hannah Hidalgo with steals. And of course, Hannah Hidalgo, for most of the season, has been leading the nation in steals per game. Virginia Tech did not credit Hannah Hidalgo with a steal on either one of those plays, even though it looks pretty, in both cases, from what I understand, they said that the Virginia Tech ball handler lost control, and then essentially Hidalgo picked up a loose ball.
What?
Yes.
You're right. They did lose control because of Hannah Hidalgo putting her hand in the way and forcing the ball out of the hand of the ball carrier, dribbler, or whatever the proper terminology is. But those are both clearly steals in that game. I mean, oh my gosh, I did not know that. How can you look at those? Like, take away anything else. Just highlight those two people with the basketball. How can you not call that a steal? I really,
exactly.
And I would. Is there like an appeal that Notre Dame can make?
It's funny you say this because I know that the program has looked into this, and that's where I got these particular clips that I just played, and they were sent to the ACC.
Good.
And apparently, I don't know exactly what the process is, but essentially it sounds like because the home team is in charge of doing stats, the home team still has to agree to change the calls if they're going to be changed. And so while apparently the ACC agrees that they sure look like steals to them, Virginia Tech is not changing the calls.
Are you kidding me? Like the ACC, this is why the conference exists, people. Like you've got to be able to overturn and be like, give them the nudge, like you messed up. You need to fix it or else, like, come on. How petty can you be? Let me ask you this. Is there somebody from Virginia Tech that is up there like with steals or something that they're kind of propping up with this whole thing?
There is not.
Okay, well, that they're doing Notre Dame dirty on that one. Real dirty, because I don't know what else you would call. I don't know what else you would call those plays.
I don't either.
I don't.
What Virginia Tech is basically saying is the Virginia Tech player, each time lost the possession independently, and then Hidalgo picked up loose balls both times. And I'll put them up here one more time. So now we're out on the wing. Hidalgo comes out, takes a poke with her hand, knocks the ball away.
Out.
Right, knocks the ball away, and then drives and lays it in. Next one, we're out near midcourt. Ball handler goes to her left, tries to spin. And again, Hidalgo gets a hand in there because she's literally got the quickest hands in the conference.
Yes.
Reaches in there, pokes it out.
I'd say in the country, but okay.
Yeah, well, maybe the country. I haven't seen every guard, but the fact that she's leading the nation in steals and also led the nation in steals last year, let's say there's probably pretty good case to be made for the entire country. Wow. Salty said she had her steals stolen from her.
She did have her steals stolen. That's messed up, man.
I agree.
That's messed up. Like, I am not.
It's baffling watching those two plays.
Correct.
And seeing how someone could determine that she didn't have steals on either one of those plays.
Right. That's just I'm not a big fan of like conspiracy theories and things of that nature, but like there's got to be a reason that Virginia Tech is just holding on to this so hard that they will not give this away. I don't get it.
Michael is asking if the ACC took away those steals. They did not take them away. Virginia Tech never credited her with steals, and they are refusing to credit her with steals on those plays. And
that's nuts.
So while those plays were sent to the ACC, it sounds like the ACC, while they agree that they should be steals, sounds like they literally have no power.
That's ridiculous.
Virginia Tech change the calls.
That's ridiculous. The ACC should have power to overturn egregious mistakes like this. Egregious mistakes. I'm not, we're not asking them to like overturn the outcome of a game or anything like that. Like that game, nobody's saying that, right? Nobody's saying to take points off the board or, this is a stat that is clear and obvious that you can add to it and it's not going to hurt anybody. It's only going to help. So why would you not do this?
And by the way, Hidalgo now is third in the nation at 3.95 steals per game. She's been over 4 pretty much all season. A player from Longwood has 4.04, and a player from Duquesne has 4.14. So let me see. Let me see if I
do some quick math here.
Yeah, I'm gonna see what it would be. I gotta get the right number in here first. If those two were credited, divided by Hidalgo would have 4.15, which would still lead the nation. So instead, she's third. If she had those 2 steals, she would still be leading the nation right now.
That's just nuts to me. That is crazy. Okay.
DK says, "Where's Jesse?" Math is in his wheelhouse.
It's true.
I had the calculator out. I did it. I didn't do it by hand, so I made sure that I had it right.
You and I both have done something right because both of our kids are way better at math than you or I are. You know what I mean? Like the next generation somehow figured it out because my kid came in talking to me today. He's in calculus 2 as a senior in high school, and he's going over all this stuff that he's learning. And I'm like, I tuned out when you started talking, dude. Like I have no idea what you're saying. None.
You lost me at hello.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously. No idea. No idea.
All right, so again, we're going to have a Notre Dame women's basketball mailbag on tomorrow's show. You can submit your questions in the thread that I posted on the Champions Lounge today. Ton of good questions there, and so we'll look forward to doing those tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. First time that we've done a women's basketball full-blown mailbag, and the questions, my friend, have not disappointed based on what I'm
looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it because I've watched. I want to say. Of the games that I can get, I've watched all the games. You know what I mean? There's been some that have been on like ACC Network X or, some crazy extra station that I don't get. But other than that, I've been to games. I've been watching the games. Like I feel ready to answer some of these questions. Obviously, you're the pro, but I'll be able to add some color to it.
I don't know.
We'll have to see.
I think you've got a good handle on a lot of the stuff. Like you said, you've watched a lot of games. You go to most of the home games. So
they're more enjoyable to watch than the men at this point. So especially after that debacle against Miami. So
it's hard to doubt. Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go, baby. A little rapid fire on a Monday.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame's blue gold game will be held April 12th.
Awful. It's awful. Because
do you have something going on April 12th?
Yeah, I do. That's why it's always about me, Sean. It's always about me. I will be in Hillsdale, Michigan, for their spring game on that day. So it's terrible timing.
Playing in it, Willie.
No, but they want all the recruits, the signees to be there.
Well, you need to just let him go by himself. You've got work to do, Vince. This is an important blue gold game.
I may. At this point, I may. Maybe that'll be the first time he drives up there on his own,
next spring we'll forgive you. This spring, come on, man. You got work to do.
I know. Well, I don't know anybody playing in this game. No, this spring is actually very important for Notre Dame because there's some very high-profile positions that are being battled for. And I'm very excited to see what happens with. I thought I had heard that the blue gold game was on the 26th of April. And so I
think they changed it because I thought that I heard that as well. But they officially announced it today and said the 12th. I think that this is the earliest I can remember them doing a blue gold game. And
very early. It's usually the end of April.
Because it's been around like the 20th, even the 24th over the last few years. I went back and looked at some dates just to make sure. So it's definitely been later, because there were times where it was the same weekend as the NFL draft for a few years there. So
I'm thinking there's a couple of reasons for it. Number one, I think they kind of want to just not get it over with, but with the season going as long as it did, I think they're just ready to kind of.
That's what I'm wondering. What's the spring schedule going to look like? Are they going to condense this?
Remember, it was spread out big time,
right?
Before.
Because the fact that they're getting this done, before this, basically in the second week of April instead of later in April. I'll be really curious to see what the spring schedule is going to look like. Do they?
Yeah.
Because we were speculating, do you, instead of having a practice or two before spring break, do you just wait until after spring break, since you did get done so late? Or now maybe do you do a few more before spring break, and then that leaves you less after spring break because you're going to finish on April 12th now instead of a week after that.
Also think a lot of it has to do with the transfer portal window. I do. Because the transfer portal window opens on the 16th and it goes to the 25th. And with the game being on the 26th, that means the window would have been closed by the time they played the blue gold game, which that's a little hairy. You know what I mean? Because Notre Dame players would have had to jump into the portal before the blue gold game even started. Now, I also know that the blue gold game is not the be all end all for making some decisions and things like that. Things are kind of lined up at that point. You kind of know, but I think that's part of it. I think they wanted to get this done. And then for twofold, now players have a chance to jump in and Notre Dame has a chance to actively participate in the portal as coaches to bring guys in.
It's a good point, because I'll just go ahead and roll into this next one, because fill in the blank. It's blank that Nebraska may do away with its spring football game because head coach Matt Rule says he doesn't want to showcase his players that other teams could poach from them in the transfer portal.
That's one of the most paranoid things I've ever heard. I think
that this might, and I think you're exactly right. I think it's completely paranoid. Everyone has to do it. So everyone's going to start canceling spring games because you don't want to show your number 3 guard out there.
Right.
Because you're worried that someone's going to snatch him up. Everyone goes through the same thing. Matt Rule can just as easily be scouting other teams' spring games. If that's the way he's looking at it, and if Notre Dame is doing this with the portal in mind, then I think like with a lot of things, you've got to give Marcus Freeman more props in the fact that he's willing to still have the spring game. They're still going to televise it on Peacock, and he's not worried about something stupid like this, we might lose a couple guys to the transfer portal because we're playing a spring game. He's actually giving his players the opportunity to compete, play in the spring game, figure out where they are, and then if you want the portal, you can still go, the portal route, whatever it happens to be. But
It's super paranoid, and I'll tell you what, if a coaching staff is making their entire evaluation on a potential transfer portal person or player on the spring game, then they're not doing their homework in the first place.
Exactly.
Like, that's weak. Like, you can't glean what you need to glean from the spring game if you're trying to bring somebody into your program. And if you are, your program's probably not going to be very good to begin with.
Right.
So that's super paranoid, man. That is super paranoid.
And I think you look at, like any of these places, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Notre Dame, Alabama, on and on and on. Like everyone has a spring game, and it's, like popularity varies based on, where your program is, but like the fans look forward to this because it's like their first glimpse of what's going to happen next season. And, at a place like Nebraska, it's a huge tradition. They might not necessarily sell the whole thing out, but they put a lot of butts in the seats for that spring game.
And look, it's also an opportunity for people to bring their families to games. I mean, let's be honest. Like this is an affordable option for, like, if I didn't do what I do, this would be the only way I could take my entire family to a Notre Dame game.
Yeah, you could take your whole family to the spring game for probably less than what it would cost for a regular season ticket. Yeah.
Yes. It's the only way that I would be able to do that. So I have a problem with it in that regard too. Like Notre Dame's not trying to cancel theirs, right? So this isn't towards Notre Dame, but this is towards, like, local fans are getting priced out of the market, it feels like. And this is the only way for some of them to take their families to a game. And so that's a problem for me.
By the way, Salty says you're a helicopter parent.
It's not the first time I've heard that. And I tried very hard not to be that. But I think it's inevitable. I think I just have to wear it.
So the Dallas Mavericks shocked the NBA world when they traded Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers over the weekend. What's the most shocking Notre Dame related news that would make the biggest waves? Like, if this happened, the world is going to be shocked.
If on April 16th, both Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr jumped into the portal. That would do it for me. That would be like, whoa, what just happened? That would do it. That would do it for me. So I think that's the most shock, because, like, I have gotten to the point now with the transfer portal and with all of those different things, like, there's not much that's going to surprise me as far as, like, who would jump into the portal, things like that. But those two, like, at the same time jumping in would be surprising. And then the only other thing I could think of was that, like, Marcus Freeman took a job someplace else. You know what I mean?
I came up with this question, and then, like, Freeman type stuff, like, we wake up tomorrow and Marcus Freeman's announcing he's going to take an NFL job or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, then it took me all of about 10 more seconds to go, well, of course it's the obvious one. If we all went to bed tonight and we woke up tomorrow and they announced Notre Dame is joining a conference, like, that would be the thing that would rock.
Yeah.
That would rock the world. That would be the one.
That would absolutely rock the world. And then, like, what would people complain about that aren't Notre Dame fans?
Literally have nothing to complain about with Notre Dame anymore, right?
Because, I mean, that would rock some worlds. There's no doubt about that. That would absolutely rock some worlds for sure. That's a good one. I didn't even think about that one. Because that's
like I said, it's the most obvious one that's right in front of you. Because again, I'm like going through it because, like, I came up with the question first, then I'm like, okay, what would it be when I started thinking about it? And, like, these Freeman scenarios first, and I went, oh, dummy, and I'm like, Vince is going to have this. Like, it's so obvious. And then you didn't,
because it was so obvious that I totally disregarded that as an option. Disregarded that as an option.
Yeah. That would be the one that would, like, and I think it would be kind of on this magnitude, because it's like everybody, even non-NBA fans, I think, like, when they saw this, it's like, they did what? It's like, this guy was just playing in the NBA finals last year.
It's true. I've seen a lot of, like, I don't follow the NBA by any stretch of the imagination. Like the last time I watched the NBA was in the 90s with like the Bulls. You know what I mean? Like that's really the last time I paid attention to the NBA. But I know the players that they're like and I don't even mean the players on the teams, like the players of the NBA, you know what I mean? Like the big names and stuff like that. I've seen both sides of this. Like, oh, this is a blockbuster trade. And then I've heard like Luka Doncic is lazy and fat and overweight and all these other
drinks
things.
Too much,
and
apparently. And
all these different things. And then apparently LeBron's going to go to the Warriors. And like, I don't know what's true, what's not, because I just don't follow it and I don't care. But it seemed on the face of it to be like a huge trade in the favor of the Lakers. Right. But people are saying that it's not. So I don't know, man. I have no idea what the deal is with this whole thing. So I know it's enough that it's all over my timeline on Twitter, which that has never happened. I've never had NBA all over my timeline. So
it took over yesterday, and I'm the same way. Andre says, which conference? Like
Notre Dame be a founding member of the PAC. That's where they're going to head back, and they're going to put the PAC on their back. Bring that back.
PAC in the back. Bring it back. All that rhyming. Snapping and rhyming.
I'm feeling it.
Fill in the blank. Jack Kaiser being voted the top linebacker for the American squad at the Senior Bowl is blank.
Very deserving. I think that, the country doesn't know Jack Kaiser the way that they should. And I'm hoping that within the NFL, community, they're starting to know who Jack Kaiser is, because he is a very athletic quarterback or linebacker. Excuse me. He's a very athletic linebacker who doesn't get enough credit for what he's able to do. And then obviously on top of that, he's an incredibly intelligent guy. He is football smart. He's, book smart. He's all of those things. I think he could carve out a good NFL career. I'm not saying he's Ray Lewis. Like, I'm not like, that's not what I'm saying, but there's plenty of inside linebackers in this league that he can play with and that he is just as good as. And I think he can carve out a pretty nice little career here in the NFL as an inside linebacker.
He exceeded my expectations this year because he was a part-time,
I get that.
He didn't play it, like he had a really, I remember he had a really good PFF grade last year, but he also played the fewest snaps of any of the linebackers. And obviously having him back with all the younger guys, like it seemed like that was the biggest benefit to having him. But then he goes out, ends up leading the team and tackles, plays at a really high level. And, again, like he wasn't like the linebackers were never an issue this year. They were, like here and there, there were, some tackles or some fits and whatever else, but like they were never a liability by any means. Again, like could they have played better in the national championship game? Yeah, but how much of that was game plan, whatever else? I just like to see Kaiser go from more of a role player last year to full-fledged in his 6th year, because you don't always see guys really blossom like that in year 6 as well. And like this was, again, he was voted this by the guys on the other side of the ball, the offensive linemen, the tight ends, the running backs who had to play against him. They voted Kaiser the top guy. So I think it's pretty awesome to see that. And I absolutely, think that he's got a really good chance at playing in the NFL. At the very least, he could be a number 2, off-ball linebacker and playing a bunch of special teams for somebody. Yeah. But, like I think DK was saying, like it would make a lot of sense if you saw Jack Kaiser potentially wearing those Cincinnati Bengals stripes, considering where his old defensive coordinator is right now.
Of course, I'm trying to, ESPN doesn't do a very good job of telling me where teams are drafting past round 1. Because I was curious as to see, where Cincinnati is on day 2, where are they at day 3, like that kind of a thing, because I could see that being a very good fit. I mean, how many times did we hear Al Golden, when being interviewed, talk about how smart Notre Dame players are and how much easier it is to coach them because of how smart they are?
Right.
I could easily see him taking a flyer on a Jack Kaiser late in day 2 or early day 3, that kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Depending on what the boards look like and what the needs are and all of those different things. I mean, like I said, I think he can carve himself out a nice a nice NFL career, a nice one.
For sure. J.D. Bertrand came on toward the end of the season for the Atlanta Falcons. He was out there.
He played a bunch.
Yep. Vince, do you have a problem with Chad Bowden taking former Notre Dame recruiting staffer Zaire Turner with him to USC and trying to take more from the Notre Dame staff with him when he went out there?
I do not. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Coaches do it all the time. When they leave jobs and go to different jobs, they take guys that they're comfortable with, that know who they are and what they want to do. They take them with them. And, if Notre Dame doesn't want them to leave, you got to up the salary of the guys that are trying to leave. Like, you make a better pitch to keep them. Like, I have no problem with it whatsoever. Like, if I went someplace and I was going to be in charge of something, I would take people that know me and know what I'm due with me. Absolutely. And
you want to work who you're most comfortable with and who you're confident. Like you have that relationship. And I mean, that's part of how Marcus Freeman got Bowden to come here. And they look, if we're going to have a problem with Bowden doing it, then you got to have a problem with Luke Fickell can't, wouldn't be very happy with Marcus Freeman then, because obviously between Gino Gadulli and Mike Brown, and Marcus Freeman has plucked some guys off Luke Fickell's staff since coming here.
So it sounds like USC money's not an issue. So, why would you not go?
Exactly.
If Chad called me up, I'd be like, where do I sign?
Sign me up. Got to go to a scrimmage, though, in Hillsdale on April 12th. So I got to work around that.
That's why I work in the private jet into my contract. Okay. I can use it whenever I need it.
So Marcus Freeman was at the Royal Rumble in Indianapolis this weekend, while James Franklin was at Penn State versus Iowa at the wrestling dual meet, number 1 versus number 2 Friday night. Which would you rather have attended?
This is not even close. Not even in the same stratosphere of closeness. I'm going to Penn State, Iowa, and I'm watching real wrestling. It's not close. I would have a hard time. Like, you couldn't really pay me to go to a WWE show, match, whatever they call them. That just does not interest me in any way, shape, or form.
I've been to one pro wrestling event. It was right after high school. So that's,
okay. So it's been a minute.
Not quite to 40 years yet, but we're getting in that ballpark at this
point.
I
get that it's a spectacle and it's, it's entertaining and it's all of those things. And apparently Marcus Freeman enjoys it because this is not the first one that he's been to. He's been to multiple.
Yeah. I think it was Chicago maybe last year or the year before or something like that.
And his family,
they're laying out some cash to sit there too. So
his family was at the wrestling sectional in the afternoon, and then they were all there in the evening. So I realized Indianapolis isn't that far away, but still.
That section will probably get over by 2:00 or something like that.
3:00.
3:00.
Yeah. Final started at 1 and it went to 3.
In the Royal Rumble probably didn't start until 8,
7-ish, 8.
I'm guessing. Yeah, I don't know.
So plenty of time to get down there. And that private jet will get you places pretty quickly. So
it's very true.
Could have just been
very true.
They weren't driving like us.
No. Because even if they're not in the jet, they might have a helicopter that could get them down there pretty quick.
Fair. Yeah, there's a lot of quicker ways than jumping in the old Oldsmobile or whatever, getting down there,
Yes. I'm with you. I'd be there. James Franklin was front row too,
Good for him.
It was because they had and that place was packed, and our buddy Irish English, reminded me Friday, and I recorded that and I watched part of it Friday night. And
did you?
Part of it Saturday, and you couldn't tell exactly, if the whole arena was full because they had the lights down and all that. But the lower, it was packed for Penn State and Iowa, and so they would do the intros and the guy, kind of almost like pro wrestling, where they would run out of the tunnel and they had an entryway for them to come in, and so when the Penn State guys were coming through, James Franklin was high-fiving him. Sometimes he kind of got left, hanging with the high five, but he was at least trying out there. So, it was kind of cool to see the head coach, at a wrestling like that. Head coach of a high-profile program. So,
coach, just go have a seat. Just like you can cheer, we'll get you a good seat, but you don't need to be high-fiving guys that you don't even know. Like just yeah. So that was probably a little cringy, but I still would have been there. I would have been in the front row because I really enjoy watching wrestling. I think it's fascinating. I really do. And the different techniques that are used from like little guys all the way to like the heavyweight guys. And I realize college is a different scenario than high school, but I really enjoy going to the high school meets. I really enjoy it.
Yep, for sure. Penn State dominated that meet, by the way. I was surprised how much they dominated it, but because it was number 1 versus number 2. They just took it to Iowa. Fill in the blank. The first weekend since August with no football was blank.
It was boring. It was absolutely boring. And
it really was.
Again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like Sunday was boring. I didn't really have anything to do.
I know. And we got back into town early. It's like, I want to sit down.
That's
it would have been great to watch a football game because, we had a noon game at Louisville, quick trip. No football.
I feel like they could have had the Super Bowl. I feel like they could have done it. I feel like, I know they go 2 weeks, but I feel like they could have done it. But
I guess technically there was Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl and that kind of stuff.
That's true. And I forgot about the Senior Bowl, to be honest with you, because I was at the wrestling meet. I forgot about the Senior Bowl. I may try to go back and watch a little bit of that, but it's still an all-star game. They're not, I don't know. I just want to go watch Kaiser, or Riley or, RJ Oben, that kind of a thing. But it was boring.
I agree. It was very boring. And there's going to be more of that in the very near future. But I guess we'll have spring football starting not too long.
Apparently real soon. If they're going to have the game on April 12th. So,
exactly.
It's going to be coming up here. Tommy wants me to sign my kids up for wrestling. I'll be busy all the time. Probably right. But I don't know that my remaining children are really wrestlers. Although my youngest daughter, I'm trying actually to get her to do it. So it's a brand new sanctioned sport in the state of Indiana. Is girls wrestling, and lots of opportunities there, especially at the collegiate level. So
Brian says he watched me at Louisville. I don't know how exciting that was watching the.
Well, you were right there, buddy,
by the table
because you were. Oh yeah, I saw you because you were right behind.
I'm sure because Niele Ivey would. That's like the only downside to sitting when they put us by the bench, because at Notre Dame for the home games we're on the opposite side of the bench. That's the only downside to sitting close to the bench is the coaches, walk up and down the sideline. And so a lot of times I get a coach who is camped out in front of me and I'm, leaning to one side or the other, trying to see what's right in front, and the officials too, because of where the officials set up. So there were some, there were more times that I couldn't see what was going on in the paint yesterday than normal, I think.
I can imagine. Well, there was one play where there was a fast break and Notre Dame scored really fast. And you're like, well, Notre Dame scored. I had my head down. I don't know who actually scored that basket or something like that. It was funny. I got a good chuckle out of that one. That was great.
I do remember that happening, and I can't remember who it was either.
I can't remember either, but it was really funny. I wanted to text you. I'd be like, but it was
by
funny.
The way, it was
it was great. I'm sure you would have figured it out long before a text got there, since I'm watching it on a little bit of a delay, and you've got like the scoring stuff and all that. But it was funny. Decaf, people have been asking about Emma Rich a lot. Come back tomorrow. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I'm sure that's going to be one of the questions.
Yes. Again, we're doing a women's basketball mailbag for tomorrow's show. There have been a lot of questions about Emma Risch, and all I can say is maybe by tomorrow I'll have something definite. I can tell you.
Okay.
But as of now, I can't say anything. So I'll just leave it at that.
Fair enough.
Mailbag tomorrow, though. And we'll see what we can see. So we see what we can say, all that kind of stuff. So
beautiful.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Again, mailbag, Notre Dame women's basketball mailbag. If you'd like to submit a question for it, you can do so in the Champions Lounge. Of course, you can also just show up here tomorrow and pop your questions in the chat like a typical mailbag. So
it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
That we've got. Absolutely. Hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.